With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give them the softest loungewear set, the real gift is this. And this. And this. This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give a gift that goes beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at lululemon.com.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, should you wish to be on the program, 877-973-7425. Glad to have you with me. I actually want to start this hour, carry on. Bob is on hold and related to all the Fauci stuff and the experts. I think it's perfect because I also want to answer a couple of emails I got from people asking the exact same thing. And so, Bob, you're perfect timing here. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm glad you're back, made it. I'm glad your wife is doing well.
Thank you very much.
I think it's ironic that we got the President of the United States doing an executive offer today, and it's a blatant lie. And it's the same thing with Fauci and the science on the left. And the problem is, who do you know to believe? I mean, it's very, very difficult. These people lie every time you turn around. They're lying about something, be it the right or the left. I'm not picking on either side. So
everybody's advancing an agenda. You know, Bob, I got to tell you, I'm glad you raised this issue because I get asked a lot how I show prep, and I have to read way more today than I've ever had to read in the past because of both sides pushing agendas and leaving facts out that don't help their side. Everybody wants to tell a narrative. Nobody just wants to tell me what's going on anymore. And I'm glad you say it is both sides because it really is. It's not just the left. Both sides do it. All I want to know is what's the God's honest truth, because I do believe that we can ultimately find or get very close to what is actually true. And I do think as well that during COVID, the experts got so bad at telling us the truth, they seeded a lot of doubts, and there are bad people on the right who took advantage of it to lie to people and persuade them to go off the deep end and into crazy town. Like, for example, there's Bob, let me let you go there. I appreciate this. Great example of this. For about probably a year, starting at about mid-2022, I kept seeing a list circulate on Twitter of all of these people who fell over dead from the COVID vaccine. And they were documented. I mean, it was names and ages and where they lived. All these people dead from the COVID vaccine. And I just kept seeing it, and I wanted to know the stories of who were these people. You will not be surprised to learn that not a single one of the people had actually died of COVID or died of the vaccine. My favorite one, my personal favorite, was a Welsh marathoner. Dropped dead after receiving the COVID vaccine. And this guy literally dropped dead after the COVID vaccine. He fell off a cliff. But he was listed as one of the people who died because of the COVID vaccine. Another one was someone who actually went to get the COVID vaccine and was hit by a bus right after getting the COVID vaccine and was listed as dead. I know this sounds wild, but I'm not making this up. They had this long list, about 1,000 people, and none of them had actually died of the COVID vaccine. They had all died of other things, but had gotten the COVID vaccine. Or there was another one about the random number of soccer players around the world who were suddenly dropping dead. And what's interesting is they were documenting the number of soccer players in like 2021 who had just fallen over dead spontaneously on the pitch. You know, the number was actually down from 2019, but it's a high number. I didn't actually know that many soccer players drop dead every year while in the middle of a game. But it was a couple hundred people. But globally, you added up across all 7 continents, and soccer players, they get overheated and die, particularly in South America and Africa. And people are like, oh, look, it's COVID. See, first of all, you didn't know whether these people had it or not, but they dropped dead. The problem here is it's not to pick on these people. It's that on both sides, people are really good these days about not giving you the full truth in order to advance an agenda. And that frustrates me because I do believe we should try to tell the truth, even if it doesn't work against us, or even if it does work against us. If I know the truth, I can then come up with something to say about that truth. Where I may disagree with how one interprets the truth, but we all start from the basic understanding that it's true. Now, this gets back to an email. I got it first from listener Todd, and now I've gotten the same thing from others. What about all the people who died of COVID, and it turns out it was like an automobile accident, but they listed as COVID because they got money? That's a great question. We do now know that some of the deaths from COVID were inflated. They had COVID, but they clearly didn't die of COVID. But actually, we also know that a lot of people died of COVID. There's a parallel here. I saw Jonathan Martin of Politico noting this yesterday on social media that H.L. Mencken wrote about this in the late 1930s. There was a massive flu epidemic in the very late 1930s. And in that flu epidemic, more than 1 million Americans lost their lives. Virtually every major city in America in the late 1930s had a major population decline because of the influenza pandemic. In fact, Mencken wrote how many funerals he could see from his front stoop where he lived in New York to the cemetery there in New York. Every day, a long line of carriages carrying bodies. And he noted that no one ever talked about it, that it was like a memory hold by people, that no one wanted to talk about all the deaths. We do kind of the same thing with COVID, that a lot of people died of COVID. And to the extent we talk about it, we suggest, well, maybe it wasn't really COVID, maybe it was something else. Here's how we can tell that a lot of people died from COVID, in addition to the number of people. And remember, most people who died of COVID didn't die per se of the disease, but it caused heart attacks and blood clots and things like that. So people died of those things. But if you take on average, let's just do it this way. On average, X percent of the population of your area dies. And over a 10-year period, it's X. When 2020, 2021 comes along and there's a massive increase in the deaths, well, we can say that's probably COVID that caused those deaths. There was nothing else going on in the community. We can't say all of those people died of COVID, but if every year, let's just say, for the sake of easy numbers, 10%, let's say 10% of your population dies every year. It's replenished, birth rates, all that, but 10% of people die. I'm just trying to keep the numbers easy. 10% of people die. Every year, on average, over 10, 15, 20 years, 10% of your population dies. Here comes 2020, 2021, and suddenly it's 25% of the population dies that year. Well, then we can guesstimate around 15% it was probably COVID, because it was the only other thing happening. You take out suicides and things right like that. But we also do know, and this is part of the problem, and this is the thing that Fauci can't process for some reason. He can't understand it. The healthcare experts can't understand it. I'm reminded of the girl who wrote the Atlantic piece attacking Brian Kemp, Georgia's experiment in human sacrifice, about him being the first state to reopen. You know, DeSantis is often presumed to be the first state to reopen. It's actually Georgia, under Brian Kemp, opened first. And he was vilified in the press, the governor of Georgia was, for doing this. And his point was that his job as governor is not just to balance health, but also economy and other well-being. And I remember he and I had this discussion very early on. He was really worried about shutting down schools because what about the kids who are in abusive situations? The only respite they have is when they go to school. If we're not allowing them to go to school, we're putting kids in jeopardy. In addition to their educations, we're putting them physically in jeopardy. He was really worried about that. Well, in states that stayed closed down for a very long time, suicides went up. And now, of course, we know the intergenerational skills and the learning for kids in schools collapsed. We lost a lot, and it turns out now there really wasn't a lot of data for that. Closing down schools, there really wasn't a lot of data. They said at the time there was. They said it was necessary. And look, I'm one of those people, again, and I think we should all be in this position to give some grace to say this was a novel situation that this country had never not faced since really the early 1900s with the Spanish flu. We needed to allow our healthcare professionals some liberty to try to navigate to keep us safe from a virus for which there was no cure. And so they said social distance and wear masks and shut everything down for a month, 2 weeks to stop the spread. The problem is, a month in, none of those things were working. The virus was still spreading. And instead of rethinking how we were doing it, everybody doubled down. And it was the doubling down that was the problem. It wasn't the initial effort to try to spare us a virus because it was new, it was novel. Show some grace. They're doing their best, flying blind. It was the doubling down after that happened. And that was, seriously, that was the problem. That was the doubling down and the arrogance. And now what we know is the understanding that what they were doing wasn't working, and yet they refused to acknowledge it. That's the problem. That ultimately is the problem. They refused to acknowledge they were wrong. To this day, they refuse to acknowledge they were wrong. It's not even that we need an I'm sorry. But we could probably use the data was moving fast and the virus was evolving and we did the best we could do. And yeah, we got a lot of things wrong, but we did our best. I'm willing to grant that a lot of these people did their best. But also, I think ultimately what happened, including with Dr. Fauci, is a lot of these people had never gotten to exercise that level of raw power before. And towards the end, they were enjoying exercising the raw power and making us behave in ways that they wanted us to behave in order to conform our behavior to a way they thought worked for the greater good. When politicians come telling you that it's all about the greater good, that's when you need to get nervous. Because when they want to do things for the greater good, they don't want to do anything that's good for you. They want to do stuff that's good for them, they think. And more often than not, it doesn't work out good for anybody. It just flat out ruined our economy. And now the funny thing is, the deep irony of all of it is, most of those things happened under Donald Trump. But Joe Biden's paying the price. Because Joe Biden came into office and doubled down on all those things and then doubled down on massive spending packages to bail out the economy after shutdowns and lockdowns screwed it up. And he's now paying the price for stuff that he didn't actually begin to implement. But he embraced the policies of failure. Even as Donald Trump was beginning to reject them at the end of his administration, realizing they weren't working, Joe Biden doubled down on embracing the failed policies. And now his chickens are coming home to roost because he embraced those failed policies. It's not working for him. It is a level of arrogance from these people in Washington, D.C. that refuses to acknowledge that they could be wrong. And the real problem at this point is that the successor experts are not real experts in their fields. They just happen to glom onto the experts and get promoted along the way. They don't have the expertise of the actual experts anymore. They just happen to be at the right time in the right place, and they have all the institutional arrogance to behave just like the people they that they replaced. And it's only going to end with further destruction of credibility for the experts in Washington, D.C.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Randy from Carthage, North Carolina. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, Eric. Thank you kindly for taking the call.
Sure.
It's a small town here in North Carolina, as I was telling your screener, but I'm out working in the yard, so I'm listening to you on your website.
Thank you.
Question for you regarding the whole COVID issue, and not trying to get into conspiracy theorists, and I appreciate the fact that you're trying to put the pieces in place and evaluate that. But the idea that Fauci knew all along that it came from that lab, that America was involved monetarily and with a variety of interests in that lab, I think it's more than hubris. I think it's more than just his personal pride. And looking at the other dominoes that kind of fall in place, first I want to do as you say, I believe that there are absolutely honest people in the healthcare that were doing the best they could with the information they were given to try to help fight things. I think it's also right to identify that this all started while Trump was in office. However, I do believe that there's some intention behind it all, and certainly some knowledge behind it. And it was used, as you were mentioning here just before the previous break, that the people in power had this opportunity to exercise control through what might have seemed by society as an innocent situation, and their control was not evil. I believe there's an evil component to it, not just an arrogance component. I believe there were certain people in power that had a definite interest in expanding their control, and this provided a fine vehicle for that. I think with Fauci as an example,
I understand that sentiment, Randy. One of the problems with going down that road too far, though, is ultimately you gotta say during this time Trump was the president, so why did he allow it? Now, ultimately, he began to change his mind towards the end and towards the general election and rein Fauci in. By then, it was I'm one of the people who contends that had Trump never gone along with this stuff to begin with, he probably would have won re-election. Forget everything else. Had we not engaged in the lockdowns and the shutdowns and everything else, he probably would have won re-election. I think that hinges on it, but that becomes the difficult thing where when you say that, I don't disagree. I think there were people who wanted to see just how far they could push the American public and how much control we would give to them. And a lot of it was healthcare bureaucrats who never had that taste of power before. They were ultimately going to have to give it up, but yeah, there were concerns there. But if you go too far down the road, you have to bring Donald Trump into the situation as to what he did and didn't do. And so you get a lot of squeamishness from people not wanting to go too far down the road, because ultimately at the end of the day, the buck stopped with him as president of the United States. Now, the buck can stop with you with Old Glory Bank. You can go to Old Glory Bank and become a member there. You can use them as your bank. I use them as my bank. My goodness, y'all, it's so easy to deposit cash at Old Glory Bank, even without having a physical bank branch. I've done this now twice. It works like a charm. Their app is so great. They are an innovative online bank built by conservatives for conservatives. They were worried about the debanking trends and social justice warriors trying to buy stock in banks and control them, and they've designed themselves for that not to happen. They're a great bank headquartered in Oklahoma. You can do business with them. You can bank with them. You can get loans with them. You can do mortgages with them. You can get a checking and savings account with them with no fees. I've got the no-fee checking, no-fee savings accounts, and I love them. And it's online but highly innovative, and you have a great relationship with them even though they're online. It's oldglorybank.com. You can get an account in less than 8 minutes. Fill out the form online, oldglorybank.com, oldglorybank.com. It is worth it. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. It's my bank, oldglorybank.com.
In the time it takes us to say we're making a damn delicious caramel iced coffee with Folgers Instant Coffee, you know we're all about that drizzle. You could be savoring every sip. Damn right. It's Folgers Instant.
It is Eric Erickson here across the nation, and I'm delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, Mike Pence will be coming to the gathering in August in Atlanta. If you would like to come see him, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, is going to be there. We've invited Ron DeSantis. I know Doug Ducey, the former governor of Arizona, is going to be there as well. We've got a great lineup shaping up. If you text the word ENGAGE, ENGAGE, text the word ENGAGE to the number 33777, you can get your tickets. It's August 8th through the 11th. Glenn Youngkin will be there as well, the governor of Virginia. It's going to be a great lineup. Text ENGAGE to 33777. Get your tickets to the gathering. Now, I want to go to Patty calling from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Patty, welcome to the Eric Erickson Show.
Hey, Eric. I turned down my radio for you.
Thank you very much.
So, yes, you're welcome. So I'm a real thinker, and I've been thinking a lot about the election. And, I've heard the FBI say, I think 4 times Christopher Wray has said that a terrorist attack is going to happen. Everyone be on their guard. But my concern is, what if they try to disrupt November 5th? To terrorize people to not go and vote. So my question really is, should we be voting early? Should we, Republicans normally vote. I always vote on Election Day. A lot of the Democrats do it early. Should we all take that into account? Are they going to have extra police presence? I just that this election is so important, and it would behoove those here who don't like us for someone not to get in that will close our border. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's my question to you.
So, Patty, first I will say, some people would tell you should be in the kitchen making sandwiches and not actually thinking with that brain of yours. But I would never say that. I'd only say that to my wife.
Yes, I'm very preventative. I think preventatively ahead.
I've been dying. I was going to butt in and say that. Don't be thinking.
No, let's be proactive.
It's such a great question. It is such a great question.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I've started voting early, and I wish everyone would because of this.
Right.
So take terrorism out of it for a minute. But remember, 9/11 happened on Election Day in New York. They had to postpone that election. In fact, my boss at the time, his daughter was in charge of elections for New York City, and she was in the World Trade Center. She got out of it, thankfully. That happened on Election Day. They had to redo the election. That's something we have to be worried about. But you don't even have to go that far. Blizzard, tornado, storm, you name it, in your local area. That's why I think everybody should vote early. Every vote's going to matter.
Do you mean vote early, go and stand in line early, or do it by mail?
No, I would vote by mail. Oh, so let's take Texas. Okay. Are you a Sooner fan?
No, the other school.
Okay. All right. Yeah, all right, just making sure, because I know, and you got this Texas-Oklahoma rivalry that we got to deal with here with football and all. So in Texas now, they can hack an Election Day ballot and figure out not only whose ballot it was, but how you voted. It is the wildest thing that a group of statisticians have figured out. They can identify every person's ballot, so it's no anonymous ballot, except for mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots, it's impossible to do. And a mail-in ballot, because it's a printed ballot, there's a record of it that's better than electronic voting machine. So mail-in ballots, I really do think you can track it, do it early. It's on paper. And I think that's the best way to go. And in addition, if you do it early enough, you can make sure, well, it hasn't gotten to the Board of Elections. I better go to the Board of Elections and see what's going on. Why hasn't it gotten there? If we wait until Election Day and there's a blizzard, a storm, a terrorist attack, and I think we're causing ourselves problems. That's such a good way to think about it. And I mean, you do have Christopher Wray out there saying, "Hey, we think we may have foreign hostile agents who have come into the country."
Right. Okay, so do you just send it certified to make sure it gets there so you can check on it, or?
So you don't have to do that. You can send it
Okay.
by regular mail, and if it doesn't show up within a week, now typically here's what happens. In most ways, now let me give you my example here in Georgia, but I think Oklahoma works the same way. You fill out the form, and it is tied to your cell phone number now. So you get a text message saying, "We've processed your form, and your ballot has been mailed. Let us know if you don't get it." And then you mail it back,
Wonderful.
and you get a text message saying, "We've received your ballot back. It's valid and will be counted." Most states now have that text messaging system. I think Oklahoma does. And so if you don't get the message back, then you call them and say, "Well, you hadn't gotten my ballot. What do I do?" And in many cases, they'll say, "Come to the Board of Elections, fill it out again. And if we get one in the mail that's tied to you, we're going to toss it."
Okay. Okay. All right. I have a second question too. In light of
Okay.
something that you said yesterday, you were talking about going out and knocking on doors, volunteering with your local election board. And you said something about helping people fill out their absentee ballots. But with the elderly, is ballot harvesting when you take those for them, or what is ballot harvesting?
Yeah, okay. Oh, such a good question. So ballot harvesting is when you know someone has filled out an absentee ballot and you show up at their house and say, "Hey, let me take this to the Board of Elections for you." In many states, you're not allowed to take someone's ballot for them unless you are in their family. Okay, so that show that, what is it, the documentary, the book, the 2000 Mules or whatever, about how 2020 was stolen. The publisher who I've published books with has now had to cancel the book and stop selling it because of a defamation lawsuit. One of the people that they highlighted, they showed him dropping off a pile of ballots, and it turns out it was him and his wife and his kids' ballots, which is perfectly legal. In some states, like in California, you can go to someone's door and say, "Hey, I know you voted by absentee and they haven't gotten your ballot yet. Let me take it for you." And it's legal to do that in California. It's illegal to do it in most states, including Oklahoma. You're not allowed to.
Okay.
But what you can do is you can go to someone and say, "Hey, let me help you fill out your absentee ballot form and answer any questions that you have." And you can mail the form. You can't touch the ballot, but you can do the absentee ballot form.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how can I best be of help here in Oklahoma? I mean, we can all look at the economy and say, "Oh my gosh, we need a change here." I'm a little bit scared to knock on doors because there's so much tension right now. But
honestly, I'll tell you, call your local, either your local Republican Party headquarters, or if you have a campaign, whether it's the Trump campaign or another campaign you want to help. Sign up on their website to be a volunteer. And in a lot of cases, what it'll be is not door knocking, it'll be phone calling. So one of the things that happens is oftentimes members of churches will give their church directories to campaigns, and they ask people to start calling those people in their local community. And so you may get a list of phone numbers and say, "Will you call your neighbors and ask if they'll vote," instead of showing up at doors. That they may need you to show up at an event to man a table and check people in, stuff like that. I started doing this when I was in college, and I find it to be fun. I mean, I hate crowds, but I actually love helping campaigns. It's a fun thing to do.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so should I just go to the local Republican or my congressman?
Yeah, I don't. Now, if it's an elected official, don't go to their official office because they're not allowed to answer those questions. Find the campaign office.
I know where it is.
And yeah, they can help you do that. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you have a job in the middle of the day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Normally I do, but I have some time off this summer.
Okay. Well, what I was going to tell you is one thing you could do if you want to, and this is actually one of the coolest things to do. But you'd have to give up a day of work, and that is call your county board of elections and see if they need a poll worker. That's kind of a fun process because they train you to run the election. And so you can actually see, so for example, in Georgia, there were a lot of people who they really believed that different aspects of the election were stolen because of stuff they saw. And I encouraged them, go sign up to run the election for your county. And so many of them called back and said, hey, this thing that I thought was fraud, I didn't realize was a legitimate part of the process. And now I understand it. My mother-in-law for years did this. She's gotten older now. She doesn't want to do it as much anymore, but it's an all-day thing. You're there from sunrise to sunset, but you're in charge of the election. And if you want to make sure the election goes off flawlessly, well, you're in charge.
Okay, very good. And is there any way I can be helpful with the swing states? I can't because I'm from here, right?
Well, okay, so it's funny you should say that. If you work like with the presidential campaign, what they often do is they will ask you to call people in the swing states, and they give you a script and say, would you call people who meet your demographic, so people who look like you, and just talk to them about the campaign and see if you can convince them to vote. And all the campaigns now, when they have apps they put on your phones, and it literally like, okay, here's the number, and you're talking to the person, and you hang up and says, okay, I'm ready to call the next number unless you stop, and it cycles you through calls. It's really cool technology that they use these days.
Huh. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Eric. You have
You're
a
welcome.
wonderful day, and prayers for your wife.
Thank you so much, Patty. I appreciate it. That was a great phone call. That was a fantastic phone call. Made me look like I knew what I was talking about. In all seriousness, though, Patty, if you're still listening, and any of you, I don't like large crowds of people. I never have, which is funny because I'll stand on stage at the gathering. There'll be 1,000 people. I've spoken to a crowd of 15,000 people before, and but it's me on stage by myself. The crowd's out there. But helping with campaigns, I just have always found it fun to do. And if you really want to have an impact in 2024, being a poll worker for your local county, running the election, I mean, you're the person who shows up, you help them get the equipment set up, you're checking voters in as they come to vote, you're handing them their ballot cards for the machines or their paper ballots if you do paper ballots. It's a great way to be a part of a process that makes a real difference for our republic. But also volunteering for campaigns. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican for this. If you are concerned about the future of the country and you care about the election, be a volunteer for your campaign. I don't care whether you volunteer for Trump or Biden, depending on your political preference. It's a great way for you to meet people. It's a great way for you to be involved in a process that you care about. And a lot of people, they huff and puff and care and say we got to do something, but they don't actually ever do anything. All you got to do is go volunteer. If you have a congressman you like or a challenger to a congressman, find their campaign office and say you want to volunteer. You may just be licking envelopes or calling people. Or, I mean, I started a campaign in 94, and my job was to fix the computers because it was something I was good at. And so I would fix the computers, and then I would enter in checks into the campaign finance application for their campaign finance reports. It's a fun thing, I think, to do if you're into politics, and it does make a great difference. Now, I need to tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm because the 3-pack sale is back on. You can save $200 and get 3 of them. You can get one for upstairs, downstairs, your basement, your RV, your travel bag, wherever you need them. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK, and then the number 3, no space, ERIC3 at EdenPureDeals.com. The Eden Pure Air Purifier purifies air so it traps the dust and the pollen, stuff like that. But where it shines and where I use it is to wipe out odors. So litter box odors, just general pet odors, musty odors, cooking odors, frying odors, smoky odors. I mean, real world example, I've used it in a hotel room in a rental car to wipe out odors of people who have smoked in the car or the hotel room. You can plug it in with a USB cord in a car if it has a USB outlet, or plug it into the wall. I've used it in my own car because I might have smoked I didn't smoke a cigar in my car, but I was opening the car from the golf course and all the cigar smoke went in as I was tossing the cigar, and my wife was furious, but I fired up the Eden Pure Thunderstorm and it wiped out the odors. It worked. We've stayed at a hotel where they had fireplaces and they had an Eden Pure going in there to wipe out the fireplace odors. It works. EdenPureDeals.com. Use discount code ERIC3, ERICK3. You'll get 3 of them. You'll save $200. It's a great deal. Packs a wallop. It's so small, I travel with one in my travel bag because they're small, but they're powerful.
Blinds.com Cyber Monday Last Chance is happening now. Don't miss out on up to 45% off site-wide. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% site-wide, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number 877-973-7425. I want to take John's phone call real quick, but before I do, can I just point out we oftentimes give the airlines a hard time, the greed and stuff, but Delta, United, and American Airlines have together flown the surviving D-Day veterans to France at no cost to the veterans. And so as many American veterans from D-Day who were able to go will be at D-Day for this celebration on June 6th for the 80th anniversary celebration. And it's because American, United, and Delta worked with groups to track them down and get them there. In some cases, they were flown, well, in Delta in particular, flew the ones from the West Coast to Atlanta on private jets and then boarded them on a charter flight, flew them straight to Normandy. Thank you to the American air carriers. You all get a bad rap sometimes, but this was a really good thing y'all did. John, you're going to be the last caller today. Welcome.
I'll do this quickly. I know you're running out of time. On your conversation earlier about Fauci and how things just kept going and kept going and kept going, and we were going in the wrong direction for a very long time period, it's come to my attention that Fauci makes $480,000 a year, or did, as a government worker. He was the highest paid government worker that we had. I believe that's even more than the president. Also, from some physician friends of mine, they have informed me that he has a huge amount of patents in his name that go to medical device companies and to drug companies, which he personally receives royalties on. Now, I don't understand how a government worker can get royalties after he funds their grants and their research.
I know the answer to that one, and that one's actually, it's only partly true. He used to be in the private sector and he can collect on some of those royalties, but the ones for the government, the way the patent process works, patents are not given in the names of corporations or the government. They're given to individuals. And so he and the government has to be the named person on the patent, but he doesn't actually receive any of the royalties for the patents. A lot of people have said that, but that one's actually been thoroughly debunked. There were some when he was in the private sector that he made money on. But in the public sector, he doesn't actually receive the royalties on this stuff. That's simply not true. In fact, the government doesn't collect royalties for the most part on most of. There are some exceptions to this, but generally they don't. But they're given. So, for example, if you look at patents for Apple Computer, what you'll find is like Steve Jobs was on there, or the Apple engineers were on there for a long time when Jobs was alive. He didn't collect the royalties at all, but he had to be named. It's I don't want to get into the English common law of it, but basically patents are derived from English common law, and under patent law going back to the common law of patents, you couldn't have an entity receive a patent. Patents had to be assigned to specific individuals, and that has stayed in place this whole time. So a company doesn't actually take out a patent. The individuals within the company do. They don't get the royalties themselves. The company does. In this case, Fauci, as the head of that department, was the name on the patent, and he doesn't actually get the royalties because the government doesn't actually collect the royalties on those patents. So anyway, yeah, I do want to clarify that. But you're right. He's got an enormous amount of power. And I thought it was funny. He was passing the buck to the CDC on a lot of stuff yesterday. We were saying, oh, that wasn't me, that was them. Well, they had to do it because you had a lot of clout and say in their budget. So didn't want to own up to that stuff. All right, you guys have a great rest of the day. I will talk to you all tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.